Tax Act. So this is something the Republicans have been trying to push for a while. And it basically revamps the entire tax system. Now we're going to watch our good friend Dave Ramsey. He's a big fan of the Fair Tax Act, and we're going to watch a little bit of it. Then I'm going to go through it with you and show you what it does. It'll be educational and fun, children.
I was wondering if you have an opinion on the proposed Fair Tax Act that would eliminate federal taxes, impose a national sales tax on new goods purchased, and eliminate the IRS as we know it. That's the perfect question for the two of us. I don't know two people that hate taxes more than me and Dave Ramsey. Well, I've always been a fan of this. In fact, I lived for years in Atlanta, and Neil Bortz, who was a well-known local talk radio guy, you're probably friends with Neil.
I know Neil well.
He was a big proponent of this and wrote a book
on his show several times back in the day talking about this.
Yeah, and I like
best-selling book on it.
Best-selling book on this very issue. And I'm not going to endorse the book, nor am I going to endorse the policy, but I like the direction that it's heading, and I'll tell you why. I think a sales tax, it forces the consumer to kind of deal with it, and it's not the federal government mandating what is taken from my income.
Okay. So that's part of it. So what it does, the first thing it does is it basically eliminates the IRS. No more income taxes. Right? What it does is it replaces all that income tax, state, local tax, all that stuff with one sales tax. National sales tax that everybody pays on goods and services.
So would that mean that rather than like each state has sort of a different amount of sales tax, and some don't have any at all, the same one would be imposed on everybody?
Every state would have the same sales tax. The sales tax that it would have to be in order to kind of meet the current level of tax income, right? Which you'd have to do, otherwise it'd be devastating, is 30%. So you have to pay 30% on every good you bought. So if you went to the store and bought a candy bar for $1, you're paying $1.30.
If I bought my next pair of sneakers for $100, they'd be $130 sneakers. Right.
This is
well, I guess trying to think about how I feel about that. I'm not sure how I feel about that. You know, obviously that would feel like a sticker shock, but my paycheck would be a lot higher because they wouldn't have to withhold from it, right?
Yeah, maybe not. Your paycheck would be higher, but this is what it effectively does. And I just did two quick examples just to show you guys this is how the Fair Tax Act affects you. Okay? I can see why Ramsey likes it, but I can see where this is kind of a different deal. So, if you make $60,000 a year, right? Currently, this is, kind of rough estimate. This is sort of the averages. Single person, you're making $60,000. Your taxable income after deductions would be about $47,050. Estimate you'd owe about $5,900 in tax, right? Some of that you might get back after deductions and stuff, but you'd pay about $5,900, $6,000 in tax. So the tax bracket you'd be in would be the 22%, but your effective tax rate, the amount of tax you paid on the amount of money that was taxable, was 12.7%. So that's what you paid in tax. And the total tax percentage of your total income, your gross income, would have been 9.95%. That's how much you'd have paid in tax. Okay? And that's the current system. Under the Fair Tax Act, that same person making $60,000 has no taxable income, right? The income's not taxed. Average spending on goods and services for a person making $60,000 is about $50,000 a year. So they'd incur a sales tax of $15,000 as opposed to their $5,900 in income tax, right? And their effective tax rate would be the 30% sales tax. So the total tax percentage of their income would be 25%. So you'd go from 9.95% of your total income to 25% of your total income would be taxed. So you'd pay $9,000 more in taxes, roughly.
So the average person would be paying more.
Triple.
Okay, so I do want to point out what feels like the obvious, though.
Sure.
And it would certainly be an argument I would expect them to make, although I'm going to say I have not watched this clip, so
I haven't watched all of it either. I just watched the first part.
It being dependent on what you spend does mean that there is kind of some variance in what you would be paying in taxes.
Right. But if
I'm going to be really honest with you, I really don't spend very much money. I mean, I grocery shop like anybody else does and whatnot, but I'm very much a planful spender, and therefore I am going to bet that I would probably come in under that. Now, would I make out as well as in the current system? I don't know, but I do think I would probably come out a little bit better than.
No. You'd still be paying a lot more in tax.
I might be, yeah.
Yeah, even if you were paying, even if you only spent half the money on rent and food and shit like that, you would still be coming out, right? So the other issue is that you're talking about, because rent would actually have a sales tax attached to it too, just FYI. So rents would go up, but you're also talking about this, Lacey. You're single, you don't have kids, so you don't need to spend as much.
I literally am talking about me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And
going back to just like we were talking about this person last week who was only talking about themselves, and comparing that to an average, I am pointing out to you, I am only talking about me.
Right. The other thing about that,
not the average person that's got 3 kids.
The other thing
if
about
I had 3 kids.
Yeah.
Oh, yikes! That gets way scarier.
Right. Well, and the other thing about that too, which is interesting, is so now if you do something like that, it's going to be people already right now are having less children because the cost is the main reason. Now you're going to increase costs, so we're going to be less people.
Can you imagine the sheer number of people that would be saying, okay, before I was saying I couldn't afford to have kids, and now I literally cannot afford to have kids.
On top of that fact is what you'll see is people probably would start spending a lot less, or they start buying under the table. So
Duncan, I mean, some of the questions that feel really obvious to me, but I'm going to throw it out there because I have not done any homework on this, Fair Tax Act. I have not.
Sure.
So the questions that feel obvious to me are, gee, if that was a thing that happened, okay, so in the example, you showed me that they wouldn't be taking income tax out of my paycheck because I'd be paying it at the register instead.
Right.
What about my property tax? Would I be having a property tax, or does that go away?
No,
my property tax.
They're kind of unclear about that. There would be some sales tax involved with rent or purchasing, but not necessarily an annual tax. So it's like,
would there be a tax on my mortgage? But would my property tax go away, or would I still pay my annual property taxes?
No, there wouldn't be a tax on your mortgage. So let's say you bought the place for $300,000. All right, and purchasing the place, they would tax 30% on top. So you would actually be taking out a mortgage for $390,000.
Right, because my whatever 30% tax would be thrown in there.
It would be upfront.
It would be an upfront tax. And then I would probably not have property taxes attached to it like I do now.
No, not going forward.
Because I paid my 30% at the time of purchase.
Right. But think about much higher.
It would be really interesting to see, and I know clearly we don't have that example because I'm thinking about this now. It would be interesting to see, a comparison of what that looks like financially for a person if they, don't have property taxes but have 30% attached to the purchase of their home up front versus having property taxes through all of these years the way they do now, like comparing on the purchase of a home. I would be curious how that would.
Well, you'd be paying a lot more in interest because you'd be paying an extra 30% on top to begin. Right. On top of that fact, what you've done is you've priced out most middle-income people out of the market.
Well, yeah, and
middle and lower, especially lower income.
Okay, and let's ignore the pricing out part for just a minute. Like, hold that to the side and stop and think. People who were not priced out would also not be able to afford to buy as much property or in as preferable of neighborhoods. Probably, like it would change what they could buy.
Right.
Which can also cycle back to the I can't afford to have kids thing because I can't even afford a home that would be big enough for.
Well, and if I'm making $35,000 a year, I'm already kind of scraping by. Now I can barely afford to live, if at all, right? Because the cost of everything. So now what you've done is you've increased poverty, you've decreased spending overall, right? Which is part of the consumer price index, it's part of the gross domestic product, gross national product. People are going to be spending less because 30% of everything they spend is going to go to tax. And who spends most of the money? The bottom 80%, because they have to. And so
we were looking at somebody who is paying 60 or make 60. But what about somebody who's making 30 that's already just like barely under the current system, managing?
Right. So what you've basically done is you priced everybody who's not in the top 10% out of the market for the most part. So they're spending less and less because 30% of everything they spend goes to tax, right? So what ends up happening is gross national product falls, right? Gross domestic product falls, demand falls. You know what the demand's going to be? The black market. Because if I'm going to buy a pair of shoes, I'm better off buying them under the table illegally. So now you're going to have more expenses for policing this whole system. How are you going to enforce any of this? It's going to be, you're going to have to have entire divisions of police that are just looking for people trying to avoid tax by buying products under the market or buying them secondhand. Because if I buy it at a garage sale, how are you going to track that I didn't pay the 30% tax? Right? So what you've done is you basically stifled the economy. You basically trashed the economy because now spending is going to decrease tremendously. Plus, like you said, less kids, less workers. Wage demand is going to go up through the fucking roof. It's going to be, it's just, there's no good answer to this. But here's I can see why Dave and those guys like it, but they're not thinking big picture. They never do. But here's why they like it. I'm going to give you my second example. So let's say I have a guy making $170,000 a year or more. All right. So this person is in the top, 1% of earners in the United States. They're the highest paid people in the U.S., 170,000 or more. So this person's making 170. Currently, their taxable income after deductions would be about $157,000. The estimate that they'll owe is $31,000 in taxes for income tax. So their tax bracket's 24%. Their effective tax rate would only be 20.1%, and the total tax percentage on their income would be 18.5%. Okay? So they're making almost 3 times this guy, and they're paying about twice the percentage in tax, even though they're making 3 times more on a progressive tax system. Now, under the Fair Tax Act, my 1%er here, still making his 170, taxable income would be 0. Average spending on goods, because he makes so much money, he spends less percentage of his income on goods and services because he saves a lot or invests or does other things. So he's only spending about $85,000 a year compared to my other guy who was spending $50,000, almost all of his money, 90%. This guy's only spending half. So his sales tax incurred would only be $25,500, right? My other guy's sales tax incurred was $15,000 on his third. This guy's effective tax rate would still be the 30% of sales, but his tax percentage of income, of his total income, would go down to 15 from 18, right? So he'd save $6,000 a year in taxes. So the way this system works is it's a regressive tax system. So a progressive tax system, the more you make, the more you get taxed. And a regressive tax system, the more you make, the less you get taxed. This system is designed to be a regressive system, so the richer you are, the less you pay in tax. The poorer you are, the more you pay in tax. Because if you're only making $10,000 a year, all that money is going to goods and services. And now you have to live on 30% less. As if I'm rich, I'm not spending most of my money, or all of my money. I'm saving big portions of it, investing it, or buying businesses, or doing shit like that. Right? So I'm actually making more money and paying less in tax. So I just get richer and richer and richer. So this system is a backwards example. It's designed to take from the poor and give to the rich, as opposed to a progressive tax system designed to take from the rich and give to the poor.
Progressive is like Robin Hood.
Right, more or less.
Progressive is like, I don't know what, not Robin Hood.
It doesn't always work. Like in our tax system is a progressive tax system, but we've got so many tax cuts and loopholes and stuff that the rich generally pay less than we do. And the Trump tax cuts gave $2 or $3 trillion in tax cuts to the wealthy. You and I aren't going to see any of that. But they like it. They also like the Trump tax cuts too, but it's the world we're living in. But we'll watch
the Trump tax cuts. I remember when that happened. I remember all this excitement about the $30 more we were going to see in our paychecks. That was about what it translated into. $30. I saw $30 more in my paycheck.
But what ended up happening?
And then what ended up happening, for the first time in my life, I started owing at the end of the year. Now, we could do the math on it here. $30 per paycheck, and I'm paid twice per month.
Mm-hmm.
I owed that first year something to the tune of $2,200 to $2,400 just to the Fed. And then I owed state too. I don't remember how much to state. It was under $1,000, but I don't remember how much. But I remember owing, it was somewhere between $2,200 and $2,400 to the federal government for the first time in my life.
Well,
which is significantly more than the $30 they gave me in my paycheck.
Right. And if you look at it from the way it was designed by Paul Ryan, and they even went through this when it happened, and I remember going through it with my clients, because what ended up happening was the first 2 years you got some of these tax breaks, and some people did get some money back, and it was their taxes were lowered. But by year 3, all that sunsetted, and your taxes actually went up. As for all the tax cuts to the wealthier people, all those were permanent.
Okay, I just did the math here. So they put $720 into my paycheck over the course of a year.
Yeah.
And then
you owe $2,400.
Had me pay them like $2,300.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what happened to a lot of people. But that bottom,
the money they put me in there cost me $1,400.
Yeah.
If you want to do the math that way, roughly.
Yeah. Well, the Trump tax cuts actually increased the taxes on most people. So you pay more now in tax after Trump than you did before he came in office, unless you're making a ton of money or you're a multimillionaire. But let's watch that. They're going to talk about this a little bit more. I'm kind of curious. I haven't seen this whole thing, but I'm kind of curious of what they say, because we just went over it, and this really is a regressive system designed to give huge advantages to the rich. But I'm wondering what their justification for it is, because it's got to be bullshit.
I like the flat tax idea, which is really the guts of what Neal Boortz was kind of proposing, and that's everybody pays the same tax rate. There's this cultural divide now that the media and a lot of people on the left have created this fairness doctrine that the person who makes more should have to pay a higher percentage, and it's become this virtuous idea. And in all reality, if you look at the actual data, now, folks, some of you are going to get offended right now, and that's okay. But here's what I want you to do. While you're getting offended, I want you to actually go on this thing called Google, and I want you to do your own research. Be brave enough to research what I'm saying, because here's what you'll find. Most people in America, in fact, it's right below 50%, I believe.
It's now 51%.
51%, Dave corrects me, don't pay any federal income tax.
Well, that's true. And we've gone through that before. But you know what they do pay? Consumption tax, payroll tax, state and local tax. And they pay a lot more percentage-wise than Dave Ramsey does every year in tax. Do you remember that?
Yep.
So
some of them would be people who would own houses, in certain brackets. So some of them property tax on top of it.
Yeah. Let me see if I can find that video real quick, but we'll go back through it because we've done this so many times. Here it is.
Come to TurboTax and don't do your taxes.
Of course, we have to do an ad anyway, but
We'll do your
so yeah, we'll walk through it. So this explains real quick. We're just gonna do the real quick beginning and ending of this. So these people
in America. This person on the left, she represents the poorest 10% of Americans. And on the right, he is the very richest 10%. So let's
just skip to the
end. You
end.
can see that poor people pay a much larger portion.
So consumption taxes, lower classes pay more, right? Which is already sales tax. That's what they're talking about. These people pay more than the richest people in sales tax. And they're talking about let's raise the sales tax. So these numbers are going to go up from whatever is 10, 12 now to 30%. To the very top of the scale for these people. I mean, it's going to go there for everybody, but for these people, they pay less.
When we put these taxes together, suddenly we see a big change.
But you notice the purple is income tax. If you take income taxes away, now the richest people are paying even less than the poorest people. The poorest people are paying the most, percentage-wise. That's what's so fucking sneaky about this. And he's saying that's fair. That's what fair is. That's his whole argument. And we're going to... So we'll skip it. I'm going to do one more video here. This is Robert Reich. He was an advisor under Obama, but he's going to talk a little bit about taxes, progressive taxes, and how that worked in two different experiments.
Conservatives have been telling us that a healthy, business-friendly economy depends on low taxes, few regulations, and low wages. Are they right? Well, we've had an experiment going on here in the United States that provides an answer. At the one end of the scale are Kansas and Texas, with among the nation's lowest taxes, least regulations, and lowest wages. At the other end is California, featuring among the nation's highest taxes, especially on the wealthy. Lots of regulations, particularly...
So Kansas and Texas moved to a regressive tax system, thinking it would drive in more business and drive up their economy. California didn't really do that, but it's not intentionally, but that's just how it is in California, is it's reversed. It's very progressive in California because they have high taxes.
So Texas and Kansas did something that is more like
more
what the Fair
akin.
Tax Act sort of proposes,
right.
More closer to that.
Ideologically closer to that, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. California did something that was but we had only they did it more progressive than the U.S. does it. California's got a more progressive tax system, but he's going to tell you what happened to these three states
when it comes to the environment and high wages. So according to conservative doctrine, Kansas and Texas ought to be booming, and California ought to be in the pits. Actually, it's just the opposite. For years now, Kansas's rate of economic growth has been the worst in the nation. Last year, its economy actually shrank. Texas hasn't been doing all that much better. Its rate of job growth has been below the national average. Retail sales are way down. Value of Texas exports has been dropping. But what about so-called overtaxed, overregulated, high-wage California? California leads the nation in the rate of economic growth, more than twice the national average.
So I'm just going to stop in there. And not to say California doesn't have its problems and everything, but the thing about it is, if you took California out separately from the United States, California is the 7th largest economy in the world. Just by itself. So, yeah, higher taxes, higher wages, more progressive tax system, always better than a regressive tax system. It's always worked better. If you have too much circulating at the top and nothing at the bottom, then what's your workforce doing? I mean, what's the point? Right? If you can't, I mean, you work 2 jobs and still make nothing. So, anyway, so just to look at all those things combined, the progressive tax system, kind of where the conservatives are going is they want to go to more of an aggressive system. They want to take away the safety nets. They honestly want to make things worse for poor people and middle class people, and make them really great for that top, 1 to 4 or 5%. So